going to share this really quickly. For watching me type. Sorry, I take a while. I still look at the keywords. That's how technologically inclined I am. So just a moment and I will get us started. All right, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. I wanted to talk to people about what is going on. I think a lot of people are very shocked that things are happening in Utah. We had the assassination of Charlie Kirk, and this week we had a young man apparently kill himself in front of his classmates, a ninth grader. So we are in some hard times now. I do want to say, if you are coming back, that yes, I was there when Charlie Kirk was assassinated. And the first thing I thought when I got up after he finished his race, because I share his faith, but the first thing that I thought after that was, of course, it happened here. It happened here with our safe and welcoming rhetoric. It happened here because we have this program called social and emotional learning. And social and emotional learning, transformative social and emotional learning, teaches people one very clear thing, and that is that some people are bad and don't deserve to exist. Literally, that some people are bad. So the reason I decided to make this video is because I watched a person this week who looked very normal. We are not talking purple hair or rainbow colored hair. We are not talking Antifa costume. We're talking a woman in a simple dress with a Christian saying behind her saying, and I quote, kill them all. That happened this week. I also watched a former school board candidate who I have no doubt will run again talk about how we have our constitution, and it says that federal rights, or I'm sorry, that state rights beat federal rights. And I think that we need to stop thinking of that as a comfortable blanket. Oh, well, Utah's a nice red state, so we're better off with our state rights than we are with federal rights. One of the things I think it's important to remember is that when President Biden was in office, our schools did not push back on what he was doing. Our schools were said, okay, fine. If you're going to take away our school lunches, if we don't allow boys and girls bathrooms, we will absolutely allow boys and girls bathrooms. Now, our legislators, they did push back, and we were able to say, no, that's not going to happen. But there were schools that hung on to that. Why? Because their schools are ran mostly by progressives. So I'm going to share with you some of the people that I listen to. I guess the first thing I should say is I am a parental rights advocate. And so I listen to a lot of people who I would say are smarter than me, but they do work in a different way than I do. The way that I try to present it is something that parents can handle, that grandparents can handle, that those who are available can handle. Because I'm a person of faith, I don't use a lot of swear words when I talk, even if I am very frustrated. And so for some people, that's what they need to hear. I guess, biblically speaking, some people can handle milk, some people can handle meat. Do I know the meat? Yes. Do I consume the meat? For sure. But I try to put this in the most, the simplest way possible. And perhaps one of the gifts that I have when it comes to this is that I do educate children. And because I educate children, I can have these conversations in a way that is less frightening than what some other people would say. So some of the people that I listen to, Courage is a Habit, his name is Alvin Louis. And Alvin Louis made a really good comment that I just heard just today. And that was, so many times parents want to say, well, that's just a few bad apples. It's just a few bad apples. Almost everybody is, good and has the right mindset. And what he said is no, there's a few good apples in an orchard that is bad. And that's what we're dealing with. So if you are taking notes and you want to write down a couple of books, the first one that I would recommend is Why Meadow Died. Why Meadow Died is pretty classically where we're at. I live in Utah, and where we are at here is pretty much exactly that. So it is restorative justice. It is protecting the schools at all costs. We have elected officials who will protect the schools and damn anyone who doesn't. Um, we also have very, very good elected officials, but I would not say that that's the case in my county. All right. So let's get started. Our children are being turned into activists through social and emotional learning, again, because is about uh, it is about fundamentally changing what a child believes. So when we think of critical thinking, we think two people having a conversation, bringing reason to the table. Now let's think about Mr. Kirk. He was literally shot for bringing reason to the table because people are not supposed to listen to people who speak against the current narrative. I could explain to you what the current narrative is, but I don't think you're going to like the word. So I'm not going to. Instead, I would just say that people believe they have an idea and their ideas are right. And if you don't agree with their ideas, you are disposable. That is, um, that's where we're at. So the first way to dispose you is just to shun you, to um, make other people believe that you're crazy, um, and to put you down every time you try to say a word. So I'll give you one example of the bad apples. My husband has filmed a few of the crazy things that have happened in our school district. And I'm going to be really clear, have happened. All he did was stood outside with a camera and took a picture. By taking a picture, he has recently been called slimy by somebody who was in his wedding. So, well, the spouse of someone who was in his wedding. And that person happens to be a teacher. So the teacher thinks it's slimy to expose what absolutely is happening in schools. They think it's slimy to have that conversation because the first thing is to protect the school, to protect the institution. Now, I want to be clear about this. Most people believe what they're doing is the right thing. No, there's very few people, sorry, there's very few people who are evil for the reason of being evil. But there are things that are wrong. There are things that are proven to be wrong. There are things that have been studied and they're wrong. And when somebody continues to do that after it's been proven, they're either ignorant or they're corrupt. That's the only way that I can look at it. So let's look at social and emotional learning. The origins started as emotional check-ins, but it has expanded. SEL embeds ideological meaning. So a page that we're going to go to, I'm just going to share my screen with you. Yes, there we go. Share my screen. So let me share my desktop. Okay. The first page I'm going to go to is SEL, Social and Emotional Learning by Castle. How does SEL support educational equity and excellence? If you don't know what equity means equal outcomes for all people. That might sound wonderful. That might sound fair, but let's look at the people who are pushing this. We're talking Gates, Zuckerberg, Chan. Locally, we're talking our governor. So these people push Castle, especially our governor's wife. They push CASEL, SEL, social and emotional learning. However, our children's mental health is not better. Um, as a parent of a child in school currently in the public school system, there's not a day when anxiety doesn't hit me, when I don't think, is something going to happen to him because of the things that I do, because I stand, because I speak out. I don't know. One of the things that social and emotional learning, it's extremely political. And one of the things that it would push for is gun control or um, freedom of speech. It pushes against freedom of speech. It says that speech can be harmful. And if speech can be harmful and you're harmed by speech, then you have a right to quote unquote defend yourself. And if that defending yourself means that you need to alleviate someone, then so be it. So CASEL started out, I don't want to go into a big deep dive because I've got an hour to cover a lot of things, but CASEL started out um, specifically social and emotional learning started with kids who could not regulate themselves in the room, which is perfectly fine. It started out with foster children. And I have a link to that. So I can completely understand having kids who don't know how to regulate themselves in a room. But then it decided to change what it means to regulate. So, what does it mean to be kind? You are not just kind by being tolerant. In fact, the woman who made her video and saying, quote unquote, kill them all, um, she actually said that pleasantness is not the same as being kind. So, what that means is that if you don't follow along ideologically completely, then you are a problem to be dismissed. Being pleasant, being civil, that's not enough. You have to believe what they say. And of course you do, because it's like what I always tell my students is it's like the emperor's new clothes. If everybody doesn't go along, it all falls apart. So they expect you to go along. That's social and emotional learning. You have to go along. You have to go along, especially with gender. So much of SEL came into our schools in 2020 with George Floyd. And people embraced it because, quite frankly, of white guilt. I'm not going to mince words here. So people embraced it because of white guilt. Other minorities embraced it because it allowed them to be the center. Some people didn't. Some people from the very beginning were like, I don't want to be seen by the color of my skin, and that primarily. But that was what was used. Another thing that's often used is disabilities. So when people were talking about removing DEI, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion, I will go through that. But when people were talking about removing DEI, they paraded a bunch of special needs kids and said they need these services. It is not what people think. Again, I will go through that. So some ideas or some of the things, and I've shared this before, so I encourage you to go and look at some of my other videos. But some of the things that some examples would be surveys that put a seed in. I saw one that was kind of ridiculous the other day, a survey, and all of the questions were about Hillary Clinton. Hillary Clinton is, these are the kind of questions. Hillary Clinton is a well-known philanthropist. Hillary Clinton is a good person. Hillary Clinton is a bad person. Hillary Clinton is corrupt. And then they're supposed to mark why. She's not even in office now, but those are questions that students were being asked on a test. Other kinds of things that they might be asked are, how many guns does your family have? Other things that they may be asked. This is one that for SEL in the military is, how would you feel if you saw a woman in a burqa? So it's very much social conditioning. And it's important to understand that that social conditioning is all over the place. It's on dating apps. It is for work. It's for the military, like I said. And yes, it is for school, starting in the youngest grades. We start to regulate emotions, but it's not just this kid throws a fit and can't sit down. It's literally, this is the way that you need to think. I was talking to a parent today who said that she has been in situations where she's had to talk a teacher out of quitting because a teacher doesn't want to do this. So, like I said, there are good teachers out there. There are teachers who know. Sometimes I will be someplace and someone will walk up to me and they'll be like, "Oh, are you Carrie Bartholomew?" And I immediately feel that anxiety because this work, quite frankly, is dangerous. Even though I am a mother, I am a mother and I teach. Those two things should not make me a dangerous person, but I definitely have been walking down the street and people have flipped me off. We've definitely seen some amazingly cruel things online. But once in a while, you get a teacher who sits down and says, please keep going. Please keep doing what you're doing. Thank you so much. I've had teachers call me crying and saying, please keep going. I can't say anything publicly, but please keep doing what you're doing because we know this is wrong. And it is. This is making our children sick. I think that you cannot argue that as you watch Utah, especially hit the main stage. You can't argue that our children are sick. When somebody believes that they should kill someone for having conversations, and when middle schoolers are cheering for it on the bus on their way home from school. And by cheering for it, I mean, it amuses me that the leftists can be so literal and just say, how dare you say cheering for something. It doesn't mean pom poms. It means they're glad it happened. And they don't have an idea of what fascism is. Silencing speech is fascism. Charlie Kirk's, even his memorial service, which was extremely religious and extreme and very much merit and be your best version of yourself. All of those can be seen as proponents of fascism, except for one thing. Fascism forces it. Fascism says, if you don't do this, we will execute you. Well, that is not happening by this administration. So fascism is when those policies. So you could say that the left and the right, okay, the left in its communistic views, everybody's okay just as they are. They don't need to strive for anything. They just need to be supported. I want a big nanny state. Over here, you have a very powerful state that says, no, everybody's not okay just as they are. They need to be the best versions of themselves. Either side says, if you don't follow us, you don't deserve to exist. That's a massively big problem, and it's not what's happening. The problem is that our kids are being taught a one-sided education. So they may hear something like Donald Trump's terrible relationship with immigrants. However, there's a ton of immigrants who support Donald Trump, but they don't hear that. It is not a balanced system in education right now. Instead, it is this side believes this. This is the only thing that you're going to hear. So a lot of people were sending me posts of Charlie Kirk said this, and it was one sentence. And I'm sitting there going, well, I know that at this event, which would have been the first event I ever attended of his, he said, we're going to be here for about 4 hours. So one sentence doesn't take 4 hours. So I went and started listening to the full context of what he said. And again, I will get into some of those as I move through this. So that's social and emotional learning in a nutshell. This is the page. You can go fundamentals of SEL. In what ways does SEL advance equity and excellence? Well, the two things cannot exist together. You have no desire to achieve more, to be the most excellent version of yourself when you get the same outcomes as everyone else. So I think just that part right there, in what ways does SEL advance equity and excellence? It doesn't. It doesn't. I was listening to a professor with charter schools. I cannot remember the group. I'm certain that this man would be more left than I am, but he was talking about what African Americans need in their schools. I personally, I believe in a colorblind society. So for me, a better question is, what do students need in their schools? And if a school is falling behind, I do think that it needs services to help it rise up. The issue that I have, and this is an issue that wasn't even allowed to be spoken when I ran for office. No, but they were just told, do not even listen to her, which is really scary and leans a lot more towards fascism than I'm personally comfortable with. But what there's a difference between saying, give the students what they need. If you've got high income schools and low income schools, fine. I have no problem with giving them services, unless the services intentionally teach the kids to be activists. And we're going to go through that. But if you teach the kids specifically to be activists, if you say, I need this grant for reading, but then all of the books have the little resist fist, or all of the books are about oppression, or all of the books are about the police are bad, then that is not excellence in education. That is taking advantage of taxpayer money to teach our kids to hate each other, to teach our kids to be activists, to teach our kids, the specific words are to dismantle the system. First, to teach them that they are oppressed, and then to dismantle those systems of oppression. Keep dismantling, keep dismantling, keep dismantling, and eventually you'll get to a place where whoever's left will get to live in utopia. But I think that whoever's left is really important. Another person I was listening to was a leftist who called herself a community organizer, said, I stand with this, I stand with this, I stand with this. But because I live in a red state, I'm still somehow part of that group. You've got to be kidding me. And yes, 100%, you can bend over backwards. You can do everything you think that you are told to do to support. But at some point, when you've sowed a seed in children that they should resent, that to resent is to resist, good luck turning that off. This is my issue. This has been my issue for the last 4 years. Good luck turning it off when you've taught kids to resist is to be empowered. So let's talk about books. And I just made a video on this subject over on Utah Moms for America. So I'm only going to share this shortly, but here's what we generally think of in scholastic books. That looks about normal, right? That looks like what we used to see in school. There's Clifford. There's The Magic School Bus. Love these books, by the way. Read them all the time. But over here, we start to get a little board books collection. Should we look at the board book collection? Let's see. Or actually, let's look at the diversity collection of books. So diversity, celebrating differences, grades K through 12. Big boy feelings, brave. Actually, none of those ones really bother me. I've always believed that having books of every culture is a great idea. It helps our kids look through different windows and understand different perspectives. The question becomes when it changes to, so Asian characters, world biographies, Coretta Scott King, Indigenous peoples, fine. The question that you constantly have to ask is, what is the book about? Is the book about activism in the end? Let's go over here. This is also from Scholastic. All of these books for kiddos, grades pre-K, You Are Brave, a book about trying new things. Well, we know that this is in the LGBTQ. Let me see if I can get past that. Okay, LGBTQIA plus children's books. So that one is grades pre-K, and we've got You Are Brave, Heartstopper, that is grades 7 through 12. Now, when you get to these books, these are not books about kids who are just attracted to one another. These are graphically sexual, oftentimes violent books. One book that is extremely violent uh, has a group of girls who turn into werewolves and eat the spleen out of a boy who SAs a girl. I believe I have to say SA over YouTube. Which boy, which leans. Now, you may think that, and especially this is a thing in Utah, well, we just want to be inclusive. We just want to make sure that everybody feels seen and everybody feels heard. Okay. In the LGBTQIA world, and I just learned that this week, the young man who shot his boyfriend had a term. He called himself a fisher. A fisher is somebody who intentionally looks for vulnerable young people. When they get them on the trans track, this is their words, not mine. When they get them on the trans track, they call it cracking an egg. That's what they call scoring one by pulling your children into this. Now, why do they want to pull your children into this? Well, this is part of what's called a cultural revolution. This one is, I mean, so far it's not as violent yet, but they're calling for it. They're literally calling for violence right now. And by they, I mean politicians. Leftist politicians are saying, get loud on the microphone. And if you're not loud, then get loud in the streets. And we've already seen it. We've already seen all of this, but now it's moving towards children. So here's just a ton of books that are all in the section. And the reason that they do that, what they do is they call it safe and welcoming or inclusive schools. Nearly every school has inclusive policies. Now you're going to go, what's wrong with being kind? Nothing. Nothing is wrong with genuinely being kind. What's wrong is when they start telling the narrative that if you aren't one of these groups or an ally of these groups, you are unkind, you are a bigot, you are a fascist. That's what's wrong, because that language incites violence. And we have it. It's all over the place right now. So school libraries, LGBTQ corners, and curated equity shelves. There are a lot of reasonable people who have said, please just put a sticker on these books so that my kid doesn't get them if they don't want them. They say we can't, because if those kids see those, if they see a sticker on the books, the kids are getting made fun of. Simply not the truth. So, yeah, it's simply not the truth. So moving on from there, reimagining classics, reimagining the classics. So that's taking books that we trust, books like Anne of Green Gables, The Secret Garden, books like that, and changing them and making them far more sexual. And when I mean far more sexual, so my background's in theater. I was in the play The Vagina Monologues for about 6 months. So I'm definitely not what you would call a prude. But there is common sense. And when books for 7th or 8th graders have to do with cousins SAing someone or holding someone down while their dad assaults them, boy or girl, we're looking at something very different. Now, this happened because of a woman named Emily Drabinski. Emily Drabinski was the head of the American Library Association. She was elected in 2020, and she said, I cannot wait to see what we do. We are going to change the world. I can't believe they elected, her words, not mine, a queer Marxist. We're going to change the world. And then what happened is book bundles started getting given to our schools. I know this because I was actually the volunteer librarian at two, technically three schools, but really two of them. So I've seen this. I've put books on the shelf that I wish that I hadn't because I had no idea what was in them. So again, not holding the librarian responsible for putting books on the shelves. However, once they are on the shelves, that becomes something very, very different. I'm going to show you an example of a book real quick. It is called Gay the Prey Away. So let's take a look at Gay the Prey Away. Gay the Prey Away. Here's the description. Valerie Daniels is in a cult. She just doesn't know it yet. When she finds a queer book at the library and smuggles it home, her conservative Christian homeschooling world begins to crack. Crack, remember that word? And when the cutest girl she's ever met shows up to Bible class, it starts to question everything. Now, the Q in we often think the Q is for queer, which means to twist the mind to the point that it's unrecognizable. That means there is no such sense, there's no such thing as truth. In fact, it goes to the point that the only truth is power. So whoever has power, this is why a school can say, oh, that thing that your kids have been telling you about for months that's happening, and that thing that there's news coverage of that's happening, it's not really here. Don't believe your kids, don't believe your lying eyes. It's not here. And they're fine with that because there is no truth but power. And whoever has the power has the truth. So that is part of, again, the book, Why Meadow Died. It's also a book called The Queering of the American Child. Truth is objective. And when truth is objective, good luck trying to navigate it. So, Gay the Prey Away. Riley is so confident and kind, and she and Valerie bond quickly over existing as multiracial teens. I mean, this is like taking ChatGPT and saying, hit every single area here. So you go there and you say, publicly, the girls are close friends, holding hands in prayer, rooming together at conference. Privately, they grasp at any chance to continue their forbidden romance until they are found out. Now, Valerie must choose between staying with a family she fears will never accept her or running away with the girl she loves. Can we just remove the LGBTQ part of it? Can we just remove that and switch it to Valerie Daniels in a cult? She just doesn't know it yet. When she finds a book at the library and smuggles it home, her conservative Christian homeschooling world begins to crack. So switch that. Switch that to, say, her Jewish or her Islamic world begins to crack. Christian, it's fine. You can be against Christians. By the way, the reason I know about this book is because it's in our local library. And a mother went up and said, I don't feel comfortable with this. I'm a homeschooler. I don't want kids seeing this. And the librarian said, well, we're a safe and inclusive school library. This is what we're doing. So you need to remember those words, safe and inclusive. They do not mean what you think they mean, unless you're part of the far left and you're progressive, and then, well, this video is not really for you. So, okay, moving on. Book clubs designed around social justice readings. Once again, we are not talking about giving two perspectives. We're talking about painting one side is right, one side is wrong. A library has limited space. Now, here's the thing. You can't do anything about a public library removing books. You, I mean, good luck. I'm not going to join that fight um, because it's the public library. What I do is let you know what's out there so that you can make those decisions for yourself, so that you can be more aware, that you can realize that there's not going to be a rainbow section because it's not the goal. The goal is to get as many kids as possible into this cult that uses our kids, that turns them into activists, because it's not just, oh, they're in love. It then becomes they should resent the people who don't allow them to fill out their love story. They should resent the Christian conservative. It's literally right there. They should resent the Christian conservative. This is teaching hate to our children. Okay. Now, yes, whenever parents push back, they're called banning books. Now, this also plays into turning our children into activists, because a teacher may say, this week or this month, September, we're going to talk about book bannings. And isn't it a terrible thing? Here's a list of all of the books that have been banned. And then they're going to read some of those books in class. And what I'm talking about are 1984, Brave New World, Animal Farm, Anne Frank. They're going to read those books and they're going to say, why in the world would parents be against these books? They are not going to read books that are graphic sex or sex with children or children having sex with mothers' boyfriends, like in the book Stealing Heaven. They're not going to have those conversations with the children. They're going to show them books that most reasonable parents would say, of course, please read that with my child. That's a great book for them to read. They're going to show that to them, and then they're going to twist it around, and they're going to say, your parents don't want you to read these books. Your parents, well, they have these old ideas, old customs, old beliefs, old cultures. That's what they're doing with our book life here. So let me close that one. So what happens? Well, our kids, after they start reading these books, or maybe they're encouraged by well-meaning parents to join groups like GSA, A Better World. Really? Are we sure it's a better world? Who gets to decide what better is? Because I promise you that if a conservative said a better world, they would be called fascists. So this is queer youth, by queer youth, for queer youth. It's called Queer Youth Assemble. I'm going to move my little screen over here. Oh, I'm going to go to the search, and I'm going to type in activism and let you see what I see when I go into activism. Zines. Let's go look at the zines. So Queer Youth Assemble, by queer youth, for queer youth, learn how queer youth assembles, building a better world. Activism guides. Okay, let's go look at them. Now, mind you, there are a bunch of people who feel that there should not be Charlie Kirk clubs in the schools or Turning Point clubs in the schools because they promote activism. And that's arguable one way or the other. What they do is, I mean, they are conservative. So, an activist guide to protesting and staying safe during demonstrations. These are in every GSA, which is a gay straight alliance. Every GSA club gets this app. The kids get this app. How do I know? Because a young person reached out to me and said, Mrs. B, I have a question. I don't understand why I need to protest to be part of a club. I don't know what it is that I don't have. Nobody treats me meanly. I don't understand what it is that I don't have. Let's keep going through the zines. An activist guide to organizing and taking action against political injustice. Once again, the kids are taught that whatever, and I promise you, if you go through these links, you're going to find out that this is out of Washington, D.C., and it's pretty much taking the Democrat list and putting it onto these papers and saying, these are the things that you should be protesting. And they're teaching this to our kids as early as seventh grade, seventh, eighth, seventh through 12th grade, maybe even sixth. But that's what's happening. If your club has a GSA, your club has activism in school. And what you think is it's a safe and welcoming place for the kiddos to just hang out and be accepted. Can I be honest with you? The majority of young people accept it until it's shoved down their throat. They accept it. They're just friends. I've had kids say that to me. I've had kids say, well, I don't really care if somebody is this or that. I don't want to hear about it all the time. But they also don't want to hear about it from their straight friends. Like such and such has a crush. Okay, whatever. Moving on. That's the way normal people see things. The problem is that the goal is always to use them. And see, this started a long time ago with something called the ghetto classes. So the ghetto classes were Black and brown people and lesbian and gay people, people who they could feed a revolutionary energy in and make them fight to destroy the system. But we're doing this with seventh graders on up. So, an activist guide to organizing political injustice. Know your rights. This says every person in the United States has a constitutional right to peacefully demonstrate. That's wonderful. Against injustice. What is injustice? For them, injustice is you can't use the bathroom of your choice. That's injustice. What about the young women who would like to have the privacy of their own bathroom? Especially we're talking junior high kids, girls who are just starting their period. Why would they want a boy in the bathroom with them? But there's no justice for them. See, because you have to prioritize the quote unquote marginalized. Moving on. Okay, so that's not a whole list of them. There's a whole bunch more. There's a guide to walking out. Yeah, there's a bunch more there. Okay, let me see if I've got any comments over here in my area. Just gonna look at my comments as I keep going here. Moving on. I would, but I don't see how to do it. Show. Okay. So DEI, let's talk about DEI. This is diversity, equity, and inclusion, definitions and rebranding. The ways that you'll hear about this in school are belonging. Everyone must belong. So if you are a person who believes in strong borders and you raise your family to believe in strong borders, you are not part of belonging. You are being cruel. So inclusion means more than inclusion. Remember, it can't just be tolerance. It has to be a lot more than just tolerance. Can I repeat those terms? I'm not sure which terms we're asking about. Sorry, I'm coming back over here to look at questions. All right, so diversity, equity, and inclusion. Belonging, inclusion, and now, even though we have supposedly we're all in line, let me stop sharing here for a moment. Even though we're supposedly all in line with administrative orders to get rid of DEI, as long as we have words like belonging, inclusion, and equity ambassadors, which are currently being sought out in most of our schools by the UEA. So people will say, oh, well, Utah doesn't have a union. So it doesn't have a union, but it has teachers associations. And if you go to the NEA's page and look up affiliates, you will find the UEA as one of those affiliates. So they're just doing what they want to anyways, which I find kind of amusing because these are the people who are constantly saying democracy, democracy, democracy. Well, democracy at its very basis means majority rule. So we had an election that our kids aren't hearing about, right? Because they're only hearing that language, threat to our democracy, threat to our democracy. They don't know what it means. Because if majority rules, Well, then they need to shut up now and do what the majority has voted on, because we were expected to, right? So we were expected to, and anything that you said that was against it, you would get called every sort of name that you could imagine. But now it's a threat to democracy. I would say a threat to all of the people who voted are the people who are constantly saying we must resist, the people who are teaching our children over and over and over again that they are victims and that they need to dismantle the system. That would be a threat to democracy. When voting no longer matters, that is a threat to democracy. But see, they don't really mean democracy. What they mean is our democracy. What they mean is what we want. It's a threat to what we want. And you have to understand it does not matter how conservative you are. If your children are learning some warped version of what democracy means, they're going to vote for that warped version. Okay, so shift from treating students equally. I treat students, and I think most good apples treat students as equally as possible. If a student needs a little bit more time, then you give that individual a little bit more time, but you don't shove them in a box and you don't make assumptions that this is what they need. One of the big problems that we have with equity, like equitable grading, is that we're not holding the person who is capable to a higher standard because equal. So one of the things that I was listening to, this man who I was saying who was probably more to the left of me, was talking about how, I can't remember what the quote was. I wish I would have written it down, but he was talking about how when you take a bunch of minority kiddos that are in a low income school and you have no expectations for them, that's what they will rise to. No expectations. But if you take a kid and you give them the services they need, and they don't need activism. You give them the services, you give them you build them up, especially for him. Tutoring was a huge part. So let's tutor these kids so that they can rise up and be competitive. But taking that money for tutoring them, for helping them be their best version, and instead using it to infuse our schools with BLM style narratives isn't helping them at all. And we know that BLM had no desire to help them at all because BLM bought large mansions. So listen and hear me well, because there are people who like to say she doesn't support, she's ashamed of being Black, etc., etc., etc. Not true. I want to see kids lifted up. That's it. All kids. And when I say all, I mean it. Let me be super clear about this. When the left says all, they mean LGBTQ. We want this for all people. No, you don't. Christians are not included in your all. Muslims who are not woke are not included in your all. Latin Americans, Black Americans are not included in your all unless they say what you want to say. If they walk around like little robots or little toy soldiers, then they're included in your all. But you don't really mean all people. Okay. Teacher trainings and policies shaped by DEI. Well, yes. So you'll get teachers. And again, I'm going to go back to the teacher who called my husband slimy. This is a person who used to share the same values I have. But she's been to a lot of teacher trainings. I've heard other people say, you know what, I used to believe what you did, and then I went to more and more of these, and I've just learned so much. Well, yeah, you did. You went and let them indoctrinate you. And I understand why, because there's incentives, there's financial incentives, there's promotions available based on how much of this extra time that you put in. There's also putting you in manipulated situations, perhaps sending you to work on an Indian reservation and seeing poverty and going, oh, the way to stop poverty is equitable systems. And then you adopt some pretty crazy ideas. You adopt ideas that, in my opinion, eat your soul. And I've seen it. So it's not just my opinion. It's talking to people who've been in and gotten out of the indoctrination. But this is fully indoctrination. In fact, I want to go here. Let me share again. Share. I want to go here, and I'm going to go to media literacy. All right. Let's see this: media literacy and digital citizenship, smuggling, censorship, and indoctrination into schools. I cannot more highly recommend looking up the Foundation for Freedom online and going down that rabbit hole. Basically, in a nutshell, in 2016, when Donald Trump won his election, many of the people on in the Clinton administration decided that this could never happen again. And so they needed to create a narrative of fake news. And here's the thing: you can make your opinions about where you think I stand on it. But the reason that I'm sharing with you the screen is so that you can do this work yourself. So you go to this work, you go to reports, and he has page after page of the documents where they're talking about what they're doing. And I was at a conference last month, and there were a bunch of lawyers in the room. And one of them said, my God, this looks like the Iron Curtain. And it does, because what it'll do is say these people are safe to listen to, these people are not. And digital media literacy tells teachers that that's what they need to tell your kids. So Wikipedia just last week got into some trouble with its bias. That's the short version, and I'm trying to keep it short so I can stay about an hour. So Wikipedia gets into some trouble with its bias, and we find out that Wiki is one of the ones that they can use. Go figure. So people like Joe Rogan, Tim Pool, Mike Benz himself, and this is his channel, all of these people are a problem. Another way that they did this is the Southern Poverty Law Center, which is basically just another branch of the far left. And the Southern Poverty Law Center, because it has a nice name, people go, oh my gosh, they're on the Southern Poverty Law Center's list. They must be terrible people. You need to understand that the Southern Poverty Law Center might as well be BLM. Do you trust everything Black Lives Matter tells you? If you do, well, this video was never for you in the first place. Okay, so affirmative action. Let's see. No, let's keep going with DEI. Definitions, rebranding, shifts from treating students equally to focusing on outcomes. How DEI divides students into groups. Yes, that's very simple. Oppressed and oppressor. Every time you hear it, that's what you should think. They're looking for an oppressor. An oppressor deserves to not exist. In a nutshell. Maybe at first they can be changed, they can be re-educated, but if they can't be re-educated, they deserve to not exist. Much closer to fascism than people saying, we think we've got some good ideas, you should try them if you want to. Much, much closer. You should be destroyed. You should not be able to work. You should maybe go to jail, or maybe even will justify and celebrate for days and days and days a man who loses his life. Okay. How DEI divides students into groups: oppressed versus oppressor, teacher training and policies shaped by DEI. Yep. A lot of teachers now This one's funny because I use the term white guilt and I'm going to use it again. There's literally a book called White Fragility. My point is, don't let them use you. You know you love your kids. If you love your kids, you care about them, and you want everybody to achieve, you're not a racist. If you follow this stuff, they will condition you to be a racist. Okay, how affirmative action ideology influences K through 12. The first one is restorative justice. So, or giving priorities to minority kids. You do a great disservice when you choose kids based on the color of their skin, because as a person of color, the idea that I will tell you, growing up and having to work hard, because it's the reality. When I was growing up and was an actress, I had to work twice as hard to get the role. And that was so good for me. And you might not like that. That might be whatever you feel, but I have a certain confidence in my abilities. I had to work twice as hard. Was it fair? Not at all. Did it hurt? Was I angry? Absolutely. But when I would secure the role and I would get a standing ovation, you can't take that away. But if you give it to some mediocre person because you want to be relevant, you're robbing the kid and you're making them think, did I get this because of my own ability? Or did I get this because of the color of my skin? And also, you're breaking the relationships with kids because they know, and they'll look at a person and they'll just be like, the respect isn't there. You are not allowing kids to build strong relationships because you're saying, oh, well, you're basically better. So we need to just step aside and let somebody else just have that moment, basically pity. And that's a terrible, terrible weight for the kid who's pitied and also the person who's been forced into it. In fact, I would argue that you're making kids far more bigoted than they would naturally be when you do those things. Equity versus equality. Equality is equity is equal outcomes. Equality is equal opportunity. So you have that play, you have that audition, you watch the kids. I don't even have a problem with watching kids blindfolded. You listen to the kids. I don't have a problem with that. But I do have a problem with saying those kids don't even get to audition to make room for this kid, because you are creating a racial divide, and it's sad. Club access, advanced accesses, scholarships tied to identity. It's the same thing. So I'm not going to go into that. Let's go into social justice and curriculum. Again, when you teach one narrative, you're not teaching, you're indoctrinating. So when our kids are hearing one-sided stories, when Al Jazeera is presented as fact, and you're only hearing an opinion, and that's presented as the only thing, then you are indoctrinating kids. You have an agenda. Now, everybody has an agenda. I tell my students this all the time. Everybody has an agenda. My agenda is to teach you how to think. So we'll watch a video, and if somebody says may have happened, then I'll pause the video and I'll say, do you hear what they said? They said may have happened. They have intellectual humility. They're understanding that this is what they think happened, but it's not necessarily true. We have an opinion, we have fact. And sometimes when you're teaching ancient history, you only have an opinion. But there's a difference between presenting that or presenting something that you know is an opinion as a fact. That is indoctrinating kids. And unfortunately, the way of that agenda tends to be leftist nihilism. Let's destroy it all. Let's get angry. Let's make our voices heard. That's what's happening in many of our schools. Okay. Some examples: the 1619 Project. The 1619 Project, reframing US history as oppression based, removing the actual history of slavery, even in America, forgetting that there were African Americans who owned slaves, let alone who sent them here, let alone the Ottoman Empire. We're forgetting all of that, and we're only starting with a narrative that somebody actually called revisionist history from the beginning. Science lessons framed through climate activism. So then we make our kids afraid, and then they're so afraid that they think, if I don't do something now, and how can I do something? I'm going to get loud. I'm going to go out. I'm going to protest. And then they go out and protest, and then the news is there to say, aren't they so stunning and brave? And then they get louder and louder and louder because you're feeding their narcissism, and you're telling them, oh, you're so stunning and brave because you've done this thing, instead of going, are you going to survive tomorrow? What can we do other than screaming and yelling? What can we do to make you feel like you've got some power to control your own outcomes? You're giving them something hopeless. You're messing with their mental health. You mess with their mental health, and then you use that fragile person to your own means. That is horrific. That's what I've got for you. That is absolutely horrific. English literature choices replaced with activist text. Absolutely. Even for the little kids, just removing white males from books. You're conditioning these children. There's no respect for the white male. So you say kids need to constantly be mirrored, or they need to see their stories mirrored. What about the white male? Does he not deserve to see his story mirrored? Or is the story too toxic? Is it too filled with toxic masculinity or the patriarchy? Just the stories of boys. The war on boys oftentimes teaches boys to hate themselves. The majority of people who commit suicide, whatever argument you want to take, when I look at the news and I see another one has done it, another one has done it, another one has done it, they sure often seem to be boys, young boys. The shooters, they tend to be boys. They tend to be boys that hate themselves so much they'd rather be girls. So they're cannon fodder. They march to war and they do what they're said, and they're told, oh, well, you're toxic, and your only way of being of any value is to sacrifice yourself. Whether that means stepping down and not taking a job, whether that means literally sacrificing themselves. This is why it's so important to talk about what's going on. Because the kids who carry through are a very different narrative than the ones that we hear about when we shovel the money towards more activism in our schools. Emphasis on action projects, right? So take Rosa Parks. There's a Walk for Rosa Parks Day. And instead of teaching the civil rights as this thing that happened that is sad and people should never have been treated that way, and being so grateful for how much we've accomplished, you take it and you say, what unfairness have you seen? Let's walk and march in the unfairness that you see today. Instead of, for me personally, the fact that I can be married to whom I want to, the fact that I can own a home or eat in a restaurant, for me and for many, many African Americans, not the ones here, because a lot here, well, I want to say not all the ones here, but the squad here, those people who are paid to perpetuate the narrative, whether that be through a being a principal or a doctor or a loudmouth woman on Twitter, whatever reason, that's not what most people want. Most people, normal people, go, wow, I'm so grateful I don't live in that part of history. And instead, I get to live today. I'm grateful for the work that people did to lay down so that we could be a more equal nation. Again, we don't teach the kids that, though, right? I mean, some schools do, and I want to shout out those schools. Some schools do, but many are making our children more miserable because they're only focusing on the bad. In fact, in the California Ethnic Studies model policy, it says we should listen to different voices. But if you don't have time to listen to different voices, then what you should do is only listen to the ones that feed our narrative. That's literally in it. So if you have some speakers come and you have three that are going to be speaking, and two of them who are going to speak about the man and the resistance, then you should let them talk. And if there's time at the end, then you can let that other person talk. That's reality of where we're at right now. Okay. And the result is that our kids are learning what to think rather than how to think. They are learning that people who don't believe exactly like they do are dangerous. They are learning that people who don't believe exactly like them are hateful, are intolerant. They are learning that it's good to not tolerate the intolerant. They are learning to react to things from an emotional standpoint always, and not to bring logic in. They're learning to debate by speaking very quickly so that they don't actually have to answer and think about the question. They just have answers. They when they talk, they are not learning to listen to another point of view, because the other point of view they're told regularly is irrelevant. They're learning to walk into a room and face the wall to protest when other people have different points of view. They're being encouraged to silently protest. All right, let's talk about clubs. I've already mentioned the GSA, Social Justice Club, climate action groups. All of these groups are praised, easily welcomed, well-funded groups. Conservative groups, just like conservative curriculum, are often called political. It's too political to have this, but we can absolutely have the 1619 Project. But too political to look at a group of professors ranging the gamut who believe in a merit-based education. That's political. That comes all the way from the USBE all the way down to the classroom. Okay. Clubs framed as leadership opportunities, and they actually open activist pipelines. So it's my little finger that is going around, my dirty little finger that's going around the internet with the queer youth, not queer youth assemble, with the armed queers. Because a couple of years ago, I went to my son's choir concert. And when I was there, I saw a thing that said, join the armed queers and join the Democrat Socialists. And it was just on a sign in downtown Salt Lake. And I picked it up and I flipped it to the other side and I saw all of their goals. And I wish I had that in front of me, but I'm sure you've seen it. It's pretty viral. I will at least pull the picture up, and then when I download it, I'll put these videos in. But let me just read to you what the goals are of armed queers. Now, armed queers happens in about college level. Here we go. The 6 principles. 1, the armed and militant protection of queer and trans communities and all oppressed people. 2, the end of capitalism, oppression, and exploitation. The movement towards a socialist society. 3, binary and biological essentialism, not assimilation. So remember that. That's really important because a lot of people say we just want everybody to be treated equally. They don't want assimilation. They don't want to be held to the same standards. They want to be centered around. They want to be the primary. They need to be the leaders and nothing. Remember what that woman said. Nothing. Tolerance is not kindness. Pleasantness is not kindness. They want you to bend over backwards and to follow every single law that they have. Housing is a human right and necessity not to be profited from. In other words, my friends, no landowners. Got a VRBO? You shouldn't. Are you the manager of an apartment complex or do you have, a few rentals? You shouldn't, because it's a right that people should be able to live without having to pay rent. Number 5, abolish police and prisons as they serve as nothing but oppressors. My friends, this is Armed Queers of Salt Lake City. That's 5, abolish police and prisons as they serve as nothing but oppressors. And 6, the end of bourgeoisie, assimilationists, LGBTQ organizations, and start the radical, queer, and trans organizations. Radical. Did you hear that word? Start the radical, not start the normal. Your neighbor just happens to think differently than you, but start the radical. That's where we're at. And we start them young. We start them with conditioning them to believe whatever social justice requires. Mind you, this is all about social justice. We start them so young that we have a ministry of families in Utah. We have studied the whole anti-racist baby stuff. Our Head Start programs have high quality education, which means they have gender closets. So they start them very, very young at radicalizing them. And when you think, well, not my kids, I'm going to homeschool my kids, then you need to think about the fact that there are groups like Better Utah and MWEG, Mormon Women for Ethical Government, who don't believe that you have a right. They're already on this. And so we can say, oh, well, that's extreme, but it's not really that extreme. In fact, if you follow the Armed Queers leader, she has gotten many awards and been very, very well funded by higher ups in Utah. So it's actually pretty mainstream that people believe these things. So again, take with you the fact that it's not a few bad apples. Your kids are being turned into soldiers. The younger they are, the more that you can change directions. But those older kids, those middle school kids, they're a prime target. Those high schoolers, some of the high schoolers are just like not buying into it, and others are pretty far gone. So I would encourage you to have a discussion with your children. Talk to them about what fascism is and isn't. Talk to them about how dangerous it is to hate people that you don't agree with. There'll be people who will possibly watch this and go, she's full of hatred. I'm not. Like I said, I really do not care what somebody does in their own private life. I care when they impose it on me. To me, that's extremism. It's not even to me. It is extremism. and to teach our kids that in some ways that's justifiable or that's right, that is a scary, scary thing. For me, my heart goes out to these kids. I just wrapped up teaching today. The opportunities to give them a joyful, normal education are still there, but you have to understand that that's not the goal. It's not the goal. We are adopting every progressive idea. So I'm going to take a look really quickly and see if any of these are about what I'm working on. Okay. I don't think so on that. And let me see over here. Can I repeat the terms? I hope I repeated the terms. I'll just go through them one more time. Any terms that we were missing. Let's see. Social and emotional learning. That's SEL, or transformative SEL. School libraries. Well, that's LGBTQIA plus. Plus. The Q is the most important part. That's questioning. If you can even get kids to question their values, beliefs, you've got a good start. DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Affirmative action and equity policies. Affirmative action. It doesn't serve either side. I have a short video on that. You're welcome to look it up. Social justice and curriculum. It's everywhere and it's getting worse. They're doubling down. Clubs and extracurriculars. You guys, please be careful about the clubs. Please know the clubs that your kid is in. Don't just say, sure, whatever, you can do whatever you want. Look into them. The best way to do it is the first thing that I do is I go to ChatGPT and I ask it very neutral questions. I don't ask it questions from a conservative standpoint. I ask very neutral questions. How are libraries implementing safe and welcoming policies? Is GSA an activist organization? Please give me examples. It's a very simple way to do those things. Now, the end, and this did go longer than I meant for it to, but that's okay. All right, so the end. Schools should focus, as we all know, on academics, not activism. If you want our children to have good mental health outcomes, it's pretty common sense. Kids, their self-esteem gets built up as they accomplish things. Let's see. Parents, watch for buzzwords, policies, library lists, clubs. Encouragement. I just do something I didn't mean to do. Maybe. Let's see. Am I still on? I'm afraid I might have messed myself up here. Let's see. No, I didn't. Okay. Encourage involvement. Attend the school board meetings. You can attend them, but in all reality, most of the people elected think they're better than you. So the best way to do it, I think, is to become a school district ambassador with us. The school district ambassador knows what's going on. They are there to be an advocate for the parents. And we have a pretty strong support system. We know our stuff. We are among those considered experts. And so we would love to have you join us. And stay engaged. Continue to be your child's number one person, the person that they talk to. If you feel like I've got a teenager, if you feel like they're starting to stray away, make every effort. Like, take them out for ice cream, take them out for sushi, do whatever you can to make sure that you're back to being your child's number one person. And again, let me repeat some of the books, or the main book: The Queering of the American Child. And if you are in Utah, Why Meadow Died. Some of the people that I would recommend listening to. And if you don't like their personalities, perfectly fine. I am, like I said, I'm more of the let me talk to you like you're in grade school and we'll start from there person. But James Lindsay's new discourses, he is he his own words, he's the Rosetta Stone of understanding what woke means. So there's James Lindsay. There's Alvin Louis, Courage is a Habit. Again, really solid information, wonderful graphics. Sometimes has a mouth on him. There is Higher Ground, which is Natalie Klein and Monica Wilbur, and they have a lot of very solid information, a lot of evidence. A group that I could not more highly recommend is Parents Defending Education. Go and look at their website. And Mike Benz, dig into that craziness on digital media literacy so much. That's like a multiple hour conversation. So I would recommend doing all of those things. And I will see you next time. Have a great night. Bye.